Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, as we are preparing ourselves in the Aseret Tshuva for Yom HaKippurim, for the day of Tahara, for the day of purification, for the day of Ashrechem Yisrael, a day where the full level, the full power, the full expansivity and expression of the Koach of the Neshama is revealed in its fullness. The day of Yom Kippur, in spite of the fact that externally it feels like the most difficult day, at least for myself. I'm not a good faster, so it's a very difficult, long, heavy day. And it appears externally like a day of din. It appears externally like a day of judgment and fear. Yet nevertheless, on the innermost side of Yom HaKippurim, there is the fullest expression of the koach, the unbreakable koach of the Jewish neshama. Because underneath the severity of the day, underneath the inuyim of the day, underneath the refraining from engaging in any physical pleasures of this day, rests the deep secret of the Jewish neshama, which is rooted in a place of tainug, which is rooted in a place of pleasure that is so great and so unfathomable in relationship to our limited understanding of pleasure, that the only way that it can express itself is by not engaging in anything physical whatsoever. And as we're going to see, the tainus, the fasting, the inuyim, the not drinking, the not engaging in anything physical is not out of fear necessarily. It's not out of the sense that I need to punish myself and therefore I need to refrain from pleasure, but rather the refraining from pleasure on Yom HaKippurim is a gesture to the sense that we have come to a place where we are fundamentally aware that there is absolutely no pleasure in this world. Even the greatest delicacies in the world, and even the greatest pleasures in this world are minimal, null and void in relationship to the true pleasure that is emergent from Nishmas Yisrael and the dveikus that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when the pleasure that we're truly seeking is of such a lofty level that it makes the pleasures that we seek in this world almost laughing matters, the only way to truly show that is that we refrain from partaking in the pleasures of this world to gesture towards the fact that these pleasures are child's play in front of our eyes. And what we are waiting for is the true source of Tainug. And we're going to see that the Ikra Avodah of Yom HaKippurim is to move from that external part of Yom HaKippur, which looks like tainus, which looks like inui, which looks like suffering, which looks like refraining, which looks like withdrawal of the self, and to move through the externals of Yom HaKippurim and to uncover the inside of Yom Kippur, which is not inui, but rather tainug. As the Tikkunei Zohar point out, that the tachlis of Yom HaKippurim is to come to recognize that it is like the day of Purim. Kippurim means that it implies a certain similarity to Purim, but we understand that if you're comparing something to another thing, the thing that you're comparing something to is typically identified as being of a loftier level, that this person is like that person in the degree of their greatness. So too, when we say that Yom HaKippurim is like Purim, what we're implying is that Yom Kippur almost comes close enough to give us a taste of the pleasures of Purim, but it's only like Purim. But ultimately, the tachlis of Yom HaKippurim is to come to the true point of unity, where we realize that the tainus and the inoi of Yom HaKippurim is going to be transformed and revealed to be an oineg, to be a tainug, to be a pleasure, to be a presence of Yom HaPurim. As the Vilna Gaon points out famously in Likutei Hagra, and Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver spends a lot of time being masbir this, Rav Hutner does as well, that Yom HaKippur and Yom HaPurim are ultimately two sides of the same coin, that the externality of the experience, as we understand Yom Kippur right now, is what we see as the inui, as the suffering, as the refrain, as the withdrawal of Yom HaKippur, but the innermost point of Yom HaKippurim is the secret of the tainug of Purim. It doesn't mean that there's Yom HaKippur and there's Purim. What it means is that there is a moichin of Purim within Yom HaKippurim, which means that the tachlis is to transform the inui itself into a source of tainug, to transform that bitterness and that withdrawal of the self and that embitterness of the body into a state of pleasure. And that's what we're going to try and discuss a little bit right now to try and see how we can do that. Now, the Mittler Rebbe of Chabad, Rav Dov Ber Shnuri, the second generation of Chabad Lubavitch, the son of the Baal HaTanya, has a very famous teaching that was brought down, obviously, by the Baal HaTanya, because the Mittler Rebbe doesn't bring anything that wasn't brought down by the Baal HaTanya, but it's a teaching that is emboldened specifically by the Mittler Rebbe, because, as we're going to see, the Mittler Rebbe is associated with Bina, which we've discussed in the past, which is understanding, which is by definition the mark of Yom HaKippur, which is an aliyah into the world of Bina, which is the shorish of tshuva, which is the shorish of freedom, which is the shorish of being removed from any stuckness that we find ourselves in. And what the Mittler Rebbe points out is as follows. The pasuk says, "Lahachyoisam bera'av," or "Lahaspia b'tzach zechos nafshecha." These two psukim point out the fact that the Jewish people are going to find themselves in a state of famine. We're going to find ourselves in a state of deficiency. We're going to find ourselves in a state of wanting, of yearning, of not having, of operating in a mindset that is rooted in scarcity, of feeling that I don't have what I need. And ultimately, God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is going to offer a promise that I will satisfy you from within that space. Don't worry too much, the pasuk says, with the famines that you find yourself in, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to come and undo those famines and fill us with plenty. That there's going to be the 7 years of bitterness and the 7 years of smallness and the 7 years of desire and deficiency, and then afterwards is going to be the time of fullness. But what the Mittler Rebbe does, like all of the tzaddikim do, is that they take this thing, which seems to be a two-stage process between prior to arriving at the goal and after arriving at the goal, or the difficult beginning and the idealized end. And the Baal HaTanya and the Mittler Rebbe show that ultimately those two forms of experience can be found in each and every moment itself. And that lahachyoisam bera'av, that God will give you sustenance in the time of famine, doesn't mean that your famine will find redemption in the sustenance and the feeding that HaKadosh Baruch Hu offers, but rather lahachyoisam bera'av means that you will find satisfaction within the hunger and within the ra'avon itself, meaning to say that within the act of hunger, within the very act of withdrawal, within the very act of holding back or refraining from engaging, the secret of inui, one will come to find a deeper secret of tainug, a deeper secret of satisfaction that one cannot even find when they're trying to satisfy their bodily and human urges in a practical way. That by refraining from engaging, by holding back, by cultivating desire, by living in the space prior to the arrival at the destination that we want to arrive at, we can taste a light that is even greater than the destination, that the hunger itself is the tachlis, that the hishtoikakus, that the ra'av, the ra'avon, the desire, that yearning desire that emerges out of a place of being aware that something is missing in my life, that there's a deficiency, that there's a lack, that in and of itself is of a loftier spiritual value to one degree or another than a state of satisfaction or a state of sipuk, which we're going to encounter on Sukkot. And Yom HaKippurim is all about lahachyoisam bera'av, lahaspia b'tzach zechos nafshecha, to give satisfaction to your soul in a time of thirst. Zaktat tzadikim, that doesn't mean that you're going to be thirsty and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to come and satisfy and quench your thirst, but rather the quenching of the thirst is going to come from the thirst itself. This is the model of Yom HaKippurim. Yom HaKippurim is a refraining, it is a disengagement with the physical aspects of reality, but not because we're denying ourselves, not because we're punishing ourselves for being in a sinful body, God forbid, as others would like to have us think, but rather we are identifying the fact that Rabbeinu Shalom, here in my desire for you, here in my dissatisfaction, here in my yearning, here in my feeling of scarcity, here in my feeling of not having enough, it is specifically where I'm going to find you. And when I can lean properly into that avodah of Yom HaKippurim, when I can lean into the secret of Purim that rests at the heart of Yom HaKippurim, I can learn how to find satisfaction within desire itself. The Mittler Rebbe also wrote a kuntras called Shar HaYichud, and his Talmud, Rav Hillel Paritcher, has a remarkable commentary. And hidden within the back of the commentary of Hillel Paritcher in Ois Chaf, in the Likutei Biurim of Shar HaYichud, Rav Hillel Paritcher is masbir a certain thing. He says, with this, we can understand the secret of Yom HaKippur, which leads us to Sukkot, which leads us to Shmini Atzeres. Ki hine Yom HaKippurim, what is Yom HaKippur? Nikra Shabbos Shabboson. It is the Shabbos of all Shabboses, which is Lamal Shabbos. It's higher than the level of Shabbos that we encounter nowadays, where there's an expression and a hint or an allusion to what the future is going to bring. Meaning what's going to be revealed in the future. What Shabbos hints to is the recognition that when it comes to our grasp of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the end of the day, all we can possibly come to is the recognition that we have absolutely no grasp whatsoever, something that is referred to in the Sfarim as he'elem ha'atzmi, the essential concealment. Essential concealment, like we've spoken about so often, is not a concealment that is the symptom of not being worthy of revelation. There are certain elements of concealment. Something is hidden from me because I haven't earned the revelation. I'm too stuck behind manios to gain revelation. That implies a need to overcome the concealment and to arrive at a place of revelation. But then there's a higher concealment. So there's a Yoshev B'Seiser Elyon, the elevated and transcendent sense of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's transcendence, which is so great, like the Rambam tells us, that the only way to be masigit is b'derech shlila, that it's so powerful and so beyond my comprehension. The only thing that I can do is recognize the inability that I can ever have to ever lay claim to any actual hasaga. Like Rabbi Nachman says over and over and over in the name of the tzaddikim, and he makes his own, that tachlis hayadiyah sheloi noida, that the greatness of knowledge is coming to the recognition that in the end of the day, I don't know. It's not an ignorance-based not knowing that is rooted in the deficiency of the mind or a learning disability on a spiritual level, but rather it is an unknowing that comes about at the result of every aspect that I can possibly know, I've come to know, and now I finally come to know that I can't know. That is the secret of the concealment of Yom HaKippurim. It's not like the concealment that is a symptom. It's the concealment that we find at the end of our journeys, where we come to realize that, oh my goodness, that Amarchi Echachmeh, I thought I would be wise, which is the secret of Rosh Hashanah, V'hi rechoika mimeni, and I come to realize that it's distant from me. The distance is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so big, is so great, is so beyond comprehension, is so profoundly infinite to the degree that the human mind has absolutely no capacity to grasp anything other than the fact that we are perpetually and completely ignorant and all we have is emuna. That concealment is referred to as an essential concealment. It's not a consequential concealment or a symptomatic concealment of some external cause, but rather it is an inherent and essential concealment that emerges out of the intense value and transcendence of the thing itself. He'elem ha'atzmi, the essential concealment, is the highest point that we can come to. Tainug ha'atzmi, tainug ha'ne'elam, the concealed pleasure that is so profoundly big that it could only be revealed by way of not engaging in any pleasure. This, unlike Shabbos, is the light of Yom HaKippurim. On Shabbos, we're still tasting even a hint of that or of la'asad lavo. So we're not completely removed from engaging. We can still taste. We can still partake in the food of this world. But on Yom HaKippurim, where we're tasting la'asad lavo, the only thing that we can actually tap into is the he'elem ha'atzmi, the tainug ha'atzmi, the tainug ha'ne'elam, which is the recognition that only by refraining can I taste the true pleasure of the fact that the pleasure that I seek is something far beyond the capacity of this world. That through the tshuva, we come to a place of atzmus dafka, kavyachol, obviously not truly atzmus, because the essence of God is always profoundly removed. And we ask, dafka. We're asking to go even higher than the Shem Havaya, lifnei Hashem titayru, that we're operating in a place lifnei Hashem. We're operating in a mindset of already living in the future, and in the future, it is abundantly clear that the only possible vessel available to provide us with a tamsitz of the tainug of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's revelation is doing absolutely nothing and not engaging in anything. It's rather by withdrawing. And therefore, all of the forms of pleasure are prohibited on Yom Kippur. Because as a result of the fact that there is a revelation of the essence of the infinite light, Kavyachol, which is the source of all ta'anugim, which is the source of the true shirish of Nishmas Yisrael, which is Olam HaTainug, and the Rebbe and Rav Hillel Parach are saying something so powerful right here, that because we're being exposed to the source of all pleasure, the true source of pleasure, the only vessel capable of receiving or tasting a feeling of that type of pleasure is the negation of pleasure in this world, because by recognizing that all of the pleasures in this world will never even hold a candle to the pleasures of La'asad Lavo, and by refraining, by coming to know that I can't know, by grasping what I can't grasp about myself, what I can't grasp about Rebbeinu Shleilim, in that way I am masigit. This is what Rabbi Nachman is masbir over and over. This is what the Leshem says that the Rambam was talking about also in his emphasis on negative theology, and the fact that all I can know is what I can't know. It's not a limited form of not knowing. It's not an ignorance that is emergent out of limitation, like we said, but rather it is the fullest culmination of the human capacity to know anything, which is the realization that I am so far from knowing anything. I am so far from knowing anything. The only thing that I can do is operate in a state of tmimus and pshitus, to dress myself in lavan without anything to say other than the words that are written in the siddur. And this engagement with the tainus, this engagement with the pain of the fast, where the body is desiring, yes, it's normal to be hungry. Yes, it's fundamentally human to be hungry. To be human is to be hungry, and to be hungry is to be human. But ultimately on Yom Kippur, every ounce of hunger awakens the sense that what I am hungry for is so far bigger than what is accessible to me here. And what I am drawing down in my hunger, in my desire, in the pain of refrain, I am encountering a nitzutz, a taste of that tainug hane'elam, that concealed tainug, that yichud hane'elam. That is the secret of Purim, of Ad lo Yada. Now, the Zohar HaKadosh says that the or of Yom HaKippur is the or of Inoi, which is a tainug habilti murgash. It's an unfelt pleasure. I don't feel anything. It feels empty. It feels painful. Masha'en kein Purim, which is a tainug hamurgash. I feel a certain type of pleasure. I'm engaged in a deep sense of the physical satisfaction that is available to an individual in this world. The avodah, the Rebbe says, Rav Yitzchak Maya Morgenstern points out, based on the svarim of Chabad, me dor harishon ad dor ha'acharon, is that the tachlis is not to live on Yom Kippur as if it's an unfelt pleasure, because that's a heilige thing, and the neshama knows what's going on, but we have to offer the guf what it wants as well. And what's the guf going to do? The ikr, as we understand from Rabbi Nachman and from the Gra and from Anshe Chabad, is that the guf is the final frontier. When we can reveal godliness in the dir b'tachtonim, that's going to be the biggest transformation available to us. So it's not enough to sit on Yom Kippur in a state of, yeah, I know that deep down, hidden within Yom Kippur is the light of Purim, and deep down within the fast is the secret of satisfaction that emerges out of desire itself. Nevertheless, we have to ensure that the body, like Rabbi Nachman says, is benefiting from the spiritual benefits of the soul. And what that means, the Rebbe says, is that we have to go from a place of unfelt pleasure into a place of felt pleasure, and bring felt pleasure back into unfelt pleasure. So it's what the Rebbe refers to as a tainug habilti murgash hamislabesh b'murgash, or haba b'murgash. It's an unfelt pleasure that is drawn down into a state of being felt. Now, what does this mean on a practical level? A Yid arrives on Yom Kippurim. A Yid arrives with a deep sense of themselves, with a deep sense of our inequity, with a deep sense of our unworthiness to enter in to this place of Tahara, with a deep disbelief in our accessibility into the Kodesh HaKadoshim of our own selves. And it becomes a difficult day. It becomes a day of somewhat boring details of Avodas Beis HaMikdash, of the Kohen Gadol who's entering Lifnayu Lifnim. And if a person is honest with themselves, at least I can reflect on myself, it's a boring day. It's a hard day. It's a day that is long, and it's a day where time seems to tick-tock very, very slowly, surging ever so slightly forward towards the end of the fast. And the farther we get into the fast, the longer it feels, and the pages are immense, and the amount of attention to detail that needs to be paid. A person can really begin to fall into a spiritual boredom where Yom Kippur is simply about fasting, where Yom Kippur is simply about refraining. But in those moments, when a person is feeling the intensity of the fast, when a person is feeling the intensity of withdrawal from the bodily experiences of this world, and trying in all of our failure to satisfy that deep desire that seeks godliness in this world, we have to pause ourselves. We have to close our minds. We have to close our eyes, and we have to pay attention to something simple. Right now, this hunger, this feeling, this urge, this craving for something that is unavailable to me, this knowledge that there is something that rests just beyond the horizon of my grasp, food, water, whatever it is that I'm desiring, that can offer me satisfaction. Let me live in the desire. Let me live with the recognition that I, as a human being, am deficient. I am lacking something, and let me sit with it. Let me sit with the desire. Let me sit with the hunger. Let me dig down deeper into the hunger. Let me come to understand that I can survive those hunger pangs. I can survive those thoughts in my mind that are telling me I can't survive. And in that moment, when a person is able to find Yishuv Hadas within the hunger, within the Tainuk Habilti Murgash, at that point, the person is Mamshech, the Kav of Purim, into Yom HaKippurim, and a person is Mahapech, the displeasure of Yom HaKippurim, into the deep pleasure of Purim, where we reveal the secret of Purim at the heart of Yom Kippur, which is that all of this is simply to teach me that Tachlis Hayadiyah Shalei Neda, that I don't know anything, I can't feel anything. What I need to feel from the Rabbanu Shleilim is something that I have to believe in. It's too strong, it's too powerful for me to actually feel in the limited technology of my body as it exists right here, right now. And therefore, the only gesture that I can rightfully offer to the deep sense that there is a pleasure beyond all comprehension is to refrain from engaging in the petty pleasures natures of the flesh, in spite of the fact that they're holy and they're kadosh and they're wonderful. Yom HaKippurim is a day where I access into that place of la'achyosim bera'av, to find satisfaction within the yearning, not to seek to satisfy the yearning, not to seek to extinguish the burning flames of desire, but rather to celebrate the desire, to value, to cultivate ratzon. The entire day of Yom Kippurim is ratzon, for tahara, a desire towards tahara. Kol ha'mechuber l'tahar taharu. Yom Kippur is a day of hishtoikakus and ga'aguim and kisufin to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And it's specifically bazois yavo aron el HaKodesh, that in the hishtoikakus, in the yearning to enter into that forbidden place of holiness that one cannot enter into, it is specifically in the yearning that we suddenly find that, wow, I am here right now, that this is exactly where I've been trying to arrive at. I am trying to arrive in that place of hishtoikakus. Kol Nidre, when we let go of all of the promises, what we're saying to ourselves is that it's not about fulfilling the promises necessarily. We have to put every ounce of effort into the fulfillment of our promises and our nedarim. But Kol Nidre comes and it says that the ikar tachlis is to make the neder. The ikar tachlis is to have ga'aguim, to have yearning, to have desire, to reach a certain spiritual ideal, in spite of the fact that we might not reach it, and to value that and to be okay with ourselves for the fact that we haven't accomplished all that we wanted to accomplish, because Yom HaKippurim is a day that is trying to help us deeply understand the simple secret of that desire is not dependent on actualization. Actualization is what we need to yearn for, but reality is reality, and the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the Welt is the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the Welt, and we recognize, we say, Rabbeinu Shalom, don't even try and judge us negatively. Everything we do is accidental. None of this is deliberate. If you want us to serve you, make it easy to serve you. We want us to grasp you, make it easy to grasp you. You want us to taste Kodesh HaKadoshim, give us Kodesh HaKadoshim, which is happening more and more with the Tzaddikim Amitim in our generation and the Torah in our generation. But we say to the Rabbeinu Shalom, Ki koil ha'am b'shgaga. Once I've let go of the shame of feeling that I'm responsible, when I've announced fully and wholeheartedly that I am the Avaryanim, I am the one, Yesh lanu rishus lispalel im ha'avaryanim, we give ourselves permission to daven with the parts of ourselves that are still unaccomplished, the parts of ourselves that are still stuck. And once we acknowledge that we're not at fault, that it's not our 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 fault, that Kol Nidre, the secret there is to recognize that I'm still going to take Nedarim this coming year. I'm still going to take upon myself desires and yearning that I want, even though I know that I might not be able to accomplish them. Because Gans Inyan of Yom HaKippurim is the tahara of the mikvah, the tahara of kivui, the tahara of hoping towards something. And in the hope itself, in the desire itself, is nested the deepest form of satisfaction, because the neshama wants what it yearns towards. The yearning is the food of the neshama, the kisufin, the ga'aguim, the hunger, all of it. And yes, sometimes it feels like physical pangs of hunger, and a person has to be mavata themselves to that and realize that I will survive and I will move forward. But in this moment of not having what I feel I need, let me close my eyes and realize that that feeling of not having what I feel I need contains exactly what it is that I need. This is the avodah of tshuva of Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippurim is a day of bina. Yom Kippurim is a hisgalus of the olam of tshuva. And bina, we know, is a space of hishtoikakus and yearning and desire and thirst and hunger and yearning for more and more. But as we've understood from the tzaddikim, from Rav Yitzchak Maya Morgenstern Shlita, from Rabbi Nachman, from the Zohar HaKadosh, from all of the tzaddikim, the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov, the Talmidim of the Gra, the Rashash, the Ramchal, all of the tzaddikim amitim, sheshoichne afar hema, and as well as the tzaddikim in our generation, that within the hishtoikakus, within the yearning associated with bina, within that unsatisfied desire, the unrequited passion that exists within the human condition, there rests the profound capacity that is singularly human, which is to find satisfaction within desire itself. The malachim don't understand this. We're only pretending to be like malachim because we don't want the malachim to get in the way. But in truth, we're tricking the malachim because we're far higher than the malachim on Yom Kippurim. The hunger that a human being feels is far higher than anything a malach can ever experience. Because a malach has satisfaction, but a human being has the koyach of hishtoikakus, the koyach of desire, the koyach of finding tainug within the inoi itself. And that becomes the kli ra'oi, that becomes the kli that enables us to draw down the most halik form of pleasure, the most halik form of pleasure, which is the recognition that Rabbeinu Shalom, I'm always going to be yearning for you, and then to find satisfaction to the pleasure of the previous year, and then to cultivate more levels of desire, so that it's a ganz year of Yom HaKippurim and Purim, that I am living with desire, satisfaction, to uncover the fact that I still have more desire, ad ein sof, because kedushasi l'mala mikdushasechem, that when we come to Ne'ilah, when we come to the highest place of the rectification of the self and or 5 halakim of itself, what we're being mavar is the Nakud of Malchus, what we're coming to a place of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, of Hashem Hu Elokim, of recognizing that within the concealment itself, within the desire itself, rests the satisfaction. Elokim is desire, Elokim is yearning, Elokim is v'techasreihu ma'at me'elokim, it's the shirish of ga'aguim, of yearning, of deficiency, and at that very core of desire we find Hashem, we find the Havaya, we find the Shleimas HaKol, and that is the balancing act of Yom HaKippurim, to balance the Inui and the Tainug, not to destroy the Inui and the refraining and just say, okay, I'm going to find satisfaction, but rather lahachyosim barav, to find the satisfaction within the yearning itself. And this is the secret that Rabbi Nachman wants to bring down when he says that he was davening to bring down a certain giloi, a certain hisgalus of a Torah of atikas tima'a, a Torah that gives the human being permission. It's the Torah that we have right in front of us, avada. It doesn't change one iota, but it's a giloi of the Torah that gives a person permission to be who they are, to live with desire, and to realize that the desire itself is going to be the source of my satisfaction. And Rabbi Nachman says that he was unable to bring about this tikkun, and there was an Aish that was Nisraf Breslov. There was an Aish in the town of Breslov that was Sayyif everything, and at Kol Nidre, afterwards, everybody had to run, and instead of saying the piyutim, they had to go and save their things, and this was a kitra gadol that Rabbi Nachman was experiencing. One can say that the Aish in Breslov, the fire in Breslov, like Rabbi Nosson says, Aish boyer bebreslov, haverota belibi, that there's a fire burning in Breslov, allow it to illuminate in my heart, is the Aish of teshuka, is the Aish of yearning and desire. And the tachlis that Rabbi Nachman perhaps wanted to bring down is the secret of finding satisfaction within the desire itself, of learning to find sipuk within the suffix, of satisfaction and sustenance within the deficiency itself. And when that is not understood properly, then God forbid, reboy desire, being only in a world of bina, of deficiency, without the deep secret of atik that's mislabish within bina, which gives a secret to the satisfaction within desire, so then it can be an aish that's sayref. Like we know that dinim that come from bina, that desire, that unbridled passion that comes from bina, can be transformed into an aish, God forbid. It could be transformed into a yearning that has no satisfaction. But the secret of Rabbi Nachman's teachings, the secret of Rabbi Nosson's teachings, the secret of the Baal Tanya, of the Gra, of all of the tzaddikim, is that there's a satisfaction within the yearning itself. And this gets expressed most fundamentally on the day of Erev Yom HaKippurim, which Rav Tzadok describes as this radical day where the eating is for the sake of desire, and Yom Kippur where the desire is for the sake of eating, where we're giving pleasure to the guf. We're saying you can partake of every pleasure. Adarabba, it's a mitzvah. Yom Kippur is not about the punishment. It's not a negation of the human condition. If it was, then the 9th of Tishrei, the day of Erev Yom Kippurim would not, the 9th day of Asar Yismei Tshuva, which is correspondent to the Midah of Yesod, which is the secret of if you feed it, it will be hungry, and if you don't feed it, it will find satisfaction. That reveals that it's not about not partaking. It's about partaking in a way that one leaves room for desire, and desiring in a way that leaves room for satisfaction, to reach that secret place of desire within satisfaction and satisfaction within desire, which then leads us into the light of Simcha, which leads us into the Suda of the Lev Yasan, which is the secret of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, where desire and satisfaction both operate in unison in a full way, both in the body as well in the soul. And Be'ezras Hashem will be Zoichet to a tainus amiti, where every ounce of pain, every feeling of struggle reveals another opportunity to be Moishe Nefesh on the belief that Rabbeinu Shalom Yesh Li Kol, I have what I need. Like Yonah ben Amitai, who's running away from the Rabbeinu Shalom only to reveal that in my running away from the Rabbeinu Shalom, that is the place that I'm going to reveal the Rabbeinu Shalom in an even deeper way. That Yonah thought he was running away, but in truth he was being Megala in even deeper kavod. The same is true for us. We feel that we're stuck in desire. We feel that we're hungry. We feel that we're thirsty. All of these things we feel highlight the bodied nature of ourselves that takes us away from Kedusha. But in spite of the fact that the body sometimes blocks the neshama, Yom Kippurim is a time where we realize that the pains of the body, the desire of the body, is in fact the very site where the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be Neskala, Be'ezras Hashem.